Welcome to PharmaSource.
Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast. My guest today is Virginie Mathieu, Procurement Director with deep experience in R&D procurement at big pharma companies and also with experience in the generic industry. Virginie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
To start with, please could you give us a bit of background about your career to date and how you ended up working with scientists in R&D?
That was basically just a random start, honestly, because I started my career out of France. And I've been basically hired in the pharma industry because I could speak English at the time. I was just freshly out of the university. And then I started working with pharmacologists from there. And that was the beginning of my career.
And from there, you were working in France at a large pharmaceutical company, I believe.
Exactly. Yes, in clinical and exploratory department.
What advice would you have for people who wanted to do a similar sort of career to you, working within R&D?
So for R&D procurement or R&D in general, for R&D, let's say, because procurement is an enabling function. And for R&D, the best advice, of course, is on the academic background and to start with having a scientific background. And for R&D procurement, this is something a little bit different. I would say to start with that career, the best advice is probably to know the business you're going to work with. And to do that, there are different possibilities. You can either have a scientific background, not mandatorily, of course, or a procurement background as well. But really the idea is to know your market and know your business.
I mean, it's such a specialist arm of procurement. What's that like, business partnering with the R&D function? It must be quite different, I imagine, to partnering with other areas of the business.
It is and it is not. It is different because indeed it's very specialized. And then I would say in any procurement business, you need to know what you're talking about. I would say even more.
Could you give me a flavor of the different categories which you work across, please?
Let's say many are services, actually. So it's very different from goods, let's say. So think about services before everything else, and think about specialty services, and think about technology services. But there are always services in any case.
How would you say the volume of suppliers in R&D compares to other functions?
Compared to other functions, it's more limited because it's more specialized. And then after you have another parameter, which is the kind of R&D, whether it's generics or big pharma, that's a big variable.
And presumably, because it's on the experimental end, does that mean that then there's lots of custom requirements which you need from your suppliers?
Always.
How do you manage that? Do you have any sort of best practices that you could share around how you manage very custom work?
Yes, that's a very interesting question because we have a lot of recurrent purchases, right? So we can standardize a big part of the activity. However, there will be always some specific requests due to innovation. So to manage a specific request due to innovation, it's just the exact same process as a first purchase, I would say. Because when you have a first purchase, you have even more an objective about understanding the need. And that requires a little bit more work than when it's already standardized, right? So understanding the need to be able to drive the business to the best procurement solution.
Does it mean that you're always having to look for new and innovative suppliers, or can you rely on your existing supply base?
No, it's better to investigate yourself. Otherwise, you can miss some market opportunities.
Yeah. Where do you tend to do that? Where do you find a good place to find new suppliers?
there are a lot of possibilities. I mean, today we have a lot of tools for that in social medias, reading specialized articles. I mean, the best source of information, generally speaking, is the business itself, because they are passionate for what they do, and they also suggest a lot of innovation possibilities. But market reports, there are a lot of sources for that. Seminaries, events, I would say the market life, right?
Mm-hmm. Are there any categories which you currently think is particularly interesting in terms of suppliers?
I think innovation is everywhere, just for the simple fact that we are living a time where digital innovation and etc. I mean, artificial intelligence, all of that innovation is potentially everywhere. You have to look for it.
Are there any particular digital tools or technologies which are particularly interesting for you at the moment?
For procurement in general, I would say obviously, and I hope in nearly any procurement organization is obviously looking at e-sourcing tools, etc. But I think the future is in end-to-end tools. Many procurement organizations have a different tool for a certain part of the process than another tool for another part of the process. So in the idea of simplifying and making it smoother and faster, obviously innovative tools, but also some tools having that end-to-end approach is probably the future.
Do you find the marketplaces useful? So the likes of scientist.com, for example?
I find it useful mainly for the tail and spend. It could be even more in the procurement daily life if it was able to qualify in addition to only proposing, to qualify the vendors, etc. Because let's say for the tail and spend, it's okay because they are small purchases, I would say, most of the time. But for the rest of the R&D procurement needs that we generally cover, we have a need to, we have a qualification need because there is a quality need. And that qualification step is, in my opinion, preventing those marketplace to go to the next level.
So when you're looking for people to join you in the function, what sort of skills do you look for do you look for people who've got a background in science and R&D, or are you looking for people who come from a procurement background?
The answer is both. I mean, I think the right balance is to have a diverse background. Both aspects are very important in R&D procurement because, yes, you need procurement skills, but you also need to understand your business. So both is the ideal balance. And generally, what I've seen in my career was a balance, a good balance between business and procurement skills. People joining with procurement skills are learning the business, and people joining with the business skills are learning procurement. Sometimes you're lucky to have someone who's coming with both, but to be realistic, it's hard to find. So we also build the skills, or we complement the skills, which is also satisfying for people joining because they learn new things anyway, whether they are from one side or the other.
Talking about diversity, so you mentioned they're having a diverse experience in both sides of things. What about diversity and inclusion, both I think within the procurement function itself, but also supplier diversity as well?
I will always be enthusiastic about diversity in general. I mean, I'm myself living in a country in which I'm not a citizen, so the diversity within a team, of course, is something which is rich and giving different outlooks. And so diversity of backgrounds, of cultures, just diversity in general for people is always something adding a certain plus to the work life for me. In terms of suppliers, diversity is also something very important, which is recognized in the industry and in the procurement world in general as a plus to bring innovation, really to bring innovation. And the best example, I mean, not the best example, there are many examples about supplier diversity, but if you take the example of the small businesses, for example, because many big pharmas have that in mind, and not just big pharmas, actually, you're just working with small businesses. This is precisely those small businesses bringing the innovation when you think about the startup ecosystems, for example. So it's, yes, we can't do and we shouldn't do without diversity, whether it's internal or external.
So what top tips do you have for anyone who'd be starting a new role in procurement R&D?
Top tips would be, if you don't know the business yet, learn it. And learn it by connecting with the business. Because this is how you will learn, but in addition, how you will build the trust with the business you work with. And that's really something which is key in this function, is to build the trust with the business. I'm always focusing on the business satisfaction. We talk a lot in the procurement world about stakeholders. I like to say that we have to think about our stakeholders like our customers, like our internal customers, like our business partners. Not just the term stakeholders is very cold for the reality of that relationship, right? They just don't hold the stakes. And we are working for them, and we are targeting their satisfaction, just like a commercial function would target the customer satisfaction. I think we have to look at procurement internally, in any big structure or smaller structure, as a function which is supporting the core business. So focus on the business satisfaction.
So what helps to do that? I mean, are there any specific examples that you've done in the past where you say, well, that actually really helped in warming up the relationship?
Yes, I mean, I have now my regular process to build the trust, I would say, because I just doing it, I noticed that there was a pattern, right? So I would say the very first step, obviously, is to connect, to understand, connect and interview, ask questions, being curious to understand what are their objectives, what's in it for them. Because once you do that, you can identify then what you can bring to them. And once you identified it, then you always find an opportunity to show the value, to showcase. So they are satisfied, you created a value, and then at the same time, you build the trust based on the reality and the work that you did.
Okay. Virginie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. You're welcome. Interesting conversation.
You've been listening to the PharmaSource podcast.